Okay, I think we're ready to begin.
Here we go. Tammy Zimmerman, Director of Finance. Okay, so, touch too soon. So previously we had Fire Department and Police Department talking about staffing. And what I wanted to go over today is our staffing that was approved with our mid-year budget amendment in April. We had previously a council member suggest a grant coordinator position, and we discussed and approved it with the City Council. And I wanted to update the council on who filled that position and what that position does. So currently we have the position filled with Cheyenne Kelly, and she's sitting in the audience, and she started in August of this past year, 2023. And so we put her to work right away. So let's go over kind of her position priorities. So top of the list, compliance management. That was the most important piece that we needed to, previously we've been a decentralized organization where all the various departments would go and seek out their grants and they would comply with all the various regulations. So staff is having to stay abreast of all the local, state, and federal regulations. And we're having to follow the uniform guidance with I believe it's Title II of the Code of Federal Regulations, and that's Part 200. We also have to follow our generally accepted accounting principles, also known as GAAP. And each grant has its own unique specific guidelines. Financial management, we have to review our contracts. We've revised our purchasing policy and that we're assisting our vendors in getting compliant with registering with SAM.gov, which I believe that's a system award management system with the federal government that the businesses have to register with, and that they're not on the debarment list. We review the allowable cost and monitor the expenditures. We are also filing all the reimbursement requests and performance reports. That can be on a monthly, quarterly, or at completion basis. We also have our Schedule of Federal Awards audit, also known as CFA, and we are currently doing that right now. And that is required for any entity that receives over $750,000 in federal funds or grant funding. Then we have research and grant applications. So we constantly, on a daily basis, we're getting lists, we're getting emails, we're on a grant watch type of website. We're going to webinars, and we're forwarded information from our various departments and looking for opportunities. And the staff liaison priority is meeting with the various departments to go over what they are looking forward to and applying for a grant. So as you can see, we've got $33 million in grant-related funding that we are managing. So I wanted to kind of go through quickly the list and detail of each of these grants and I won't take too long, so I'm gonna just kind of skim the surface. Up front is, or on top, is our Parks and Events Center grant, and it is actually federally funded by 1.4 million of that total award amount. And it's through the Economic Adjustment Assistance Grant. We have our Texas Park and Wildlife Grant, which is Hoya. That is 50% match. And we have our Bulletproof Vest Grant, which you apply for on an annual basis. And we have our Texas State Energy Conservation Office, or SECO, LED lighting retrofit grant of $27,800, which is 20% match for us. And then we have several TxDOT, Texas Department of Transportation grants for our trails. And we actually have, Shane can answer most of the questions on those grants. But those are a reimbursement type of grant. And it will be, I think we've already got several of these underway. We're working on the interlocal agreements. We have an Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant, and that is a voucher type of grant where we're purchasing a possible EV vehicle. We have DART, which is our, not really a grant, but we are including it under this position as far as management. It is $5.9 million. It has to pertain to transportation-related projects. So we will be submitting the reimbursement request and managing the compliance with that. We have North Central Texas Council of Governments, Citizen Collection Center Solid Waste Grant, and that is for, I believe it's the Collection Center building. Thank you. Texas Department Emergency Management, Cooks Creek. We will get to that particular grant in a later presentation. We'll get into more detail on that one. And we've already previously talked in prior council meetings about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, as we'll actually talk about that in the next slide. And that's 11.9 million that was awarded, and that was 100% of a match by the federal government. So you've seen the slide before. This is all of what we have budgeted within ARPA. We are currently still working on the Justice Center, which I believe will hopefully go out to bid here at the end of February or March. We have Hoya that's wrapping up, and we are doing the work in trying to complete all the paperwork and see if we have, because there's 2 grants on Hoya. And then we have Mercer Park, which we've talked about the timeline. We'll need to probably transfer that over to our Justice Center as far as funding and swap it out with general fund funding. And then the branch connection, which you just approved the contract. Potential grants, which have been identified and which we are currently applying for. We have the state and local cybersecurity grant, which will be on the next February agenda. We have our COPS hiring program, where we've met with the police department, our grant coordinator did, and we are potentially going to be asking for 3 additional police officers for the motorcycle force. And then we are constantly looking for funding through the lead and copper replacement program. And as more information is made available on the federal guidance, we will bring that forward to council. So is there any questions on the grant coordinator position and all of the grants that we're currently managing?
Councilman Robert?
How is, you mentioned that there was an EV grant. Is that going to, do you foresee that continuing, given they're shutting those down and shutting the plants down?
I'm gonna let Shane answer that one.
I think it's gonna be a one-time option.
Okay.
It's gonna look at what's the best option. This, it is unlike kind of other type of grants we've gotten. This one's just kind of not an open checkbook, so I apologize, it's probably the worst phrasing, but there's a lot more flexibility with this money, and kind of the easiest thing we thought, from talking to Alex and I, is just buying an EV vehicle, probably the easiest thing, once we all our infrastructure in place, so. But I don't think they're gonna, I'll be shocked if they keep doing this, really good.
Thank you, Tammy. I think part of my ask is going forward, and I'll probably work with you, Cheyenne, going forward through Ben, obviously. But I think you, as you read through this particular chart, we have some that have stipulations that are matching for 40% or 20% or X number of dollars. And then there are stipulations on whether or not we've already spent the money, and I think in some cases on the next slide for ARPA, you talked about how that was. I think going forward, just for me, I'd like to see that sort of charting, you know, where there are opportunities, and I mean, just understanding where we are. You know, have we eclipsed it? Are we, because while we say $33 million in awards here, we recognize that some of that money is money that we'll have to spend as well. So there's
The matching portion.
getting to understand to that, and then understanding kind of the proverbial asterisk on what those stipulations are. So that's, looking at this going forward, I'd probably see another column or two in this, and that's for future work. Just keeping it updated as we go from a reporting update standpoint. That's all.
So if I'm understanding, so we were thinking about putting in there the portion that is actually matching. And then where are we standing as far as remaining and getting our.
Correct. If we've already spent it, or when do we plan to see that project complete? So I mean,
It would make a larger chart,
unfortunately,
yeah.
I'm trying to solve something right now, but I think going forward, it's important for your office to be able to communicate that. And there's a lot more detail that would be necessary to communicate and to understand the ramifications of said grant or said dollars that are available. As you use DART, for example, that's not a grant, that's something else. So again, solving something going forward. But I think it's important that we keep all these in our, focus. And that's obviously your job, Cheyenne, and I thank you so much for that. And having come out of a compliance background myself, I know it's not easy, and you're reading rules for TxDOT versus reading rules for, Texas Parks and Wildlife. And so I understand there's a lot to, and so let me be clear, and as the mayor pointed out, a lot of times we want to be able to communicate to the residents and synopsize that. And so we have that detail in working with you in your office, and we can then communicate that more effectively. So that's all I was kind of wrapping that around. So thank you very much.
Perfect suggestion. Yeah, we have that information we can provide.
Sure.
Definitely.
If I may, so I completely agree with David, having a column on here, city cost and grant award, and then where the project is, or completion, estimated completion date, or something like that. I think that would be helpful for all of us to have as we go forward. The other thing I want, as I was listening to this, we just heard from Public Works, and they've listed out their projects that need to be done. And so I would hope that, it's a lot of work for you, but that you go through each one of these items and see if and where there might be some grant funding, so this is not all coming out of our pocket. There may or may not be, but I think we have to go through the exercise at least to see if there is. So there's a lot of projects that are listed here, so.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Great suggestions. Okay.
All right.
Okay, we're not done with grants. So we just talked about how previously the city is managing grants and has just taken that over. It was a decentralized process, and now we're centralizing it and putting in our procurement and administration of it within the finance department. So the topic that we're talking about right now, Texas Department of Emergency Management, TDEM, Cooks Creek, it has on the agenda that we're talking about the potential challenge. So I wanted to talk about that grant, but I may pull from the audience. We have Will Hines here from Public Works. He's been our utility contract compliance manager, and he's been working on this process. But I wanted to mention that this is a topic that the current city staff inherited. So when we were made aware of the issues, it was recently. And so I wanted to go over some of the issues that we were made aware of and go over the timeline. So this particular project, excuse me, it's the City of Farmers Branch Floodway Mitigation Project. And you can kind of see the map. I have a better map. But it is for the grant period of November 19th, 2020 through November 18th of 2023. So a 3-year grant period. And it is a 3.2 million award, of which the federal share is the 2.4 million. And I believe this is in a stormwater in a 100-year floodplain. And the project scope of the work is to perform the necessary engineering and construction work to design and construct a widened concrete channel for Cooks Creek. Now, the number of residential properties impacted has been identified as 99. As far as the timeline, we were awarded the grant in December of 2020. And that's key here on this next timeline, March of 2021 through February 2023, the city staff, previous city staff, relied on Cohen Resnick. It was a consultant hired by TDEM for compliance with this grant. So smaller staff, smaller size city, we did not have a grant compliance manager that could help us through the procurement and administration of this grant. So TDEM assigned us Cohen Resnick as far as getting us through this. And then we have the City Council approved the engineering contract in May of 2021. We submitted our reimbursement request in January and July for the design cost. In October of 2022, we approved the contract with Klutz Construction. And then we were notified in February 2023 that Horn LLP takes over in the place of Cohen Resnick. They are the auditors that have been assigned by TDEM to go through all previous reimbursements and make sure that all of their grant recipients have complied with all the regulations. And then we submit our third reimbursement for the construction now in May of 2023. On October 16th of 2023, we submitted a 90-day project extension request. And this was due to concrete supply was in high demand with larger developments. And we couldn't comply with the November 18th deadline. We actually have our 4th and 5th reimbursements submitted in November of 2023. And we were notified in December of 2023 that Horn, again, this is the consultant from TDEM that was hired to audit all of our information, they requested additional documentation. And in particular, it was 2 federal clauses that they were concerned with, and these relate to our third-party vendors that we procured with. And it was saying that we had inadequate documentation. The 2 federal clauses relate to the domestic procurement, or the Buy America. And the second one is a covered telecommunications equipment clause. So we have supplied to TDEM memorandums providing documentation on this job had Build in America procurement. The contractor is given a memorandum, the concrete is locally sourced, the steel was made in America, but we did not specifically have in the contract those clauses. So we have all the documentation was submitted, and then we were notified by TDEM that they're going to start the closeout process, and they're going to forward that information onto FEMA in order to make the ultimate decision on whether they will reimburse us.
Have
So
they reimbursed any 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
So the only reimbursements are on design. None of the construction reimbursement requests have been paid out.
That's on the next slide.
Yes, and it is on the next slide. Thank you. I wanted to kind of go over real quickly, January of 2024, we did a lot of activity. Our staff had virtual meetings with Horn and TDEM to go over this whole closeout process. There were several instances where we were dealing with TDEM and we were jumping through several hoops. There was a lot of verbal miscommunication with TDEM as far as the walkthrough and project extension. We weren't told that we were actually denied the project extension until January 2024, when they said, one of their staff members suggested we apply for a second extension because of weather delays. And that's when we found out we were denied the first project extension. And there was some errors on their portal uploads and where we weren't getting notified as well. Did I skip that? No. So that's where your question is right there. We are, we've already been paid the first reimbursement request, which is the design. The second one is on its way for the design, but the 3 for our construction are pending approval, and that amounts to $2.24 million from FEMA, or from TDEM. It's a pass-through from FEMA to TDEM and then on to us. And you might add up those 3, 4, and 5, and that's a larger amount, but that's the federal portion, 75%. So what is our plans of action? I believe on February 12th, TDEM will be submitting this formally to FEMA for review. And we have already discussed with our city attorney what can be done as far as any issues that we've had with Resnick. Ultimately, the grant award specified, where our responsibilities lied. Our reliance on Resnick has been duly noted with all the documentation that we submitted. We do need to wait until FEMA gives us a denial or acceptance. But we are gearing up and doing public information requests to try and determine if there's others that relied on Resnick through this process. And we're going to be reaching out to our council members as far as getting support from any state or local representatives in order to hopefully get this approval passed through FEMA. So I wanted to make you all aware of the situation and where we stand, and that we'll probably be reaching out for assistance on this. It's no small amount of change that's sitting on the table.
So Tammy, just to clarify, in 2021, when staff was going through the procurement process under, I guess it'd be bad advice at this point in time, we didn't utilize the historically underutilized business vendor list, and we didn't use the domestic procurement clauses that would have been required. That was caught as existing staff started doing the reimbursement process, and there's no way to go back in time and fix it. Is that correct? It's just to try and show.
You can't put the amendment to the contract with the construction when the construction's already done.
Okay, so this is why the grant coordinator position is so important, but also we don't want to shy away from, we've always said be open, honest, and transparent. There is a chance that this becomes a liability. To basically what it will do is it'll push other projects backwards, because grants are considered a revenue. And so this will push other projects back in the stormwater fund because of it. And so we're gonna have to wait for the process to play out, but this is where y'all's relationships with federal and state officials, it becomes political at this point in time. And so it's sort of like with TCEQ, when we had some challenges, it's really, can you get the state legislature involved and help them represent us in this one? So this is one, it's a federal agency, we're a subrecipient for the state. It's a challenge, but I just want to make sure I painted the timeline, because like, Tammy, how did this happen? And it's like, well, 3 years ago, there were some errors that were made, and I can't take that away, it is what it is, but we want to present it to our council, make sure you all are aware of the situation as well. So I'll open it up to you all.
So Ben and Tammy, I wish I'd known how to speak about this more intelligently, because I had dinner last night with Beth Van Dyne. So I mean, getting in front of our Congresswoman that's easy enough to do. And plus, she's going to be coming at some time to speak at council meeting. Our state representative, Julie Johnson, lives in Farmers Ranch, and we can talk to her easy enough also, and she will also be coming to speak to council on some other different matters. So I think what we need is a well-crafted synopsis that we can put in their hands, and we might as well ask them for help now. I mean, I don't know that we sit around and wait.
So staff and I discussed, Ryan Carter, of course, has been included in all of these meetings as well, on the memorandum that we could possibly put towards you in submitting to your state representatives, and hopefully they can reach out to their contacts and so on. So we are going to get together on that memorandum and put that timeline in there and what exactly that we're asking for.
And I'm just curious, for the FEMA part of things, is there anybody up in Denton that's like a local area contact, or are you having to go to Washington on that?
So I know that we've been discussing, who do we know at TDEM that went to FEMA? I believe we've identified one staff member, and that's an angle that we're trying to kind of see if we can make our way in. But as far as going to the federal level, I don't know that we have any specific ends, so that's what we're going to be looking for.
Okay. David, you got?
Two questions, if I may. And you actually answered the first one related to what have we, from a staff perspective, done with relation to TDEM and potentially FEMA, and still crafting that pathway. You made mention that the 2.2 is our portion, is the grant portion. I want to make sure that I understand correctly, and memory serves me correctly, that we budgeted already for the remaining portion in prior budgets. So that 2.2 is hanging in the balance. The other portion has already been paid for. So that, I just wanted to validate that.
We'll add Tam Parker to that list also.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, just for the council, who would y'all like taking the lead for this with us, working with the legislatures on the federal and state level? Because we can't work with everyone at once because we start creating those quorum issues. It's easier if we have a designated contact, 2 or 3. Is there a set group of you all that's interested and has those relationships? And the energy to federal government interactions can be.
Yeah. I guess part of the question is, Ben, what did our attorneys say to the fact that, was it Cone Resnick didn't necessarily adhere to those 2 clauses? Did we, and I'm going to ask an add-on to that, did we write the RFPs or did Cone Resnick write the RFPs?
Oh, Tammy's done the research on this one.
And Will can correct me if I'm wrong, or Cheyenne, but I believe we wrote them and then submitted it to Cone Resnick for approval, who then said, looks good, and we passed it on.
Gotcha. Okay, and I think the mechanics, going back to the narrative that, the mayor is asking for, is super important that we know, yes, there's a reliance, but the reliance is at that point. We wrote this, they looked at it, gave us, and so we need to know that that's the handoff point, and we were expecting them to validate all the necessary clauses were included, and they weren't, so we getting,
Yes, we've
my
got,
father would say snookered at this particular time. So,
So Tammy, I guess when you're to the point, I would be happy to set up a meeting with Beth. That's easy enough for me to do, easy. And State Senator Tan Parker, easy enough to do. I know Julie, she's in and out, but we could get her. But, and these are three people that we could have local audiences with on a face-to-face basis. So I would not want to go, if council wants me to, I mean, I'm happy to go, but I wouldn't want to do it by myself. I'd want to take you and or Ben, so we could have the best possible discussion with them.
some of it is waiting till we actually submit it to FEMA, which is happening on the 12th. So once that's been done, we can start that process.
Okay.
Right now, it was just going through the closeout process. And we've submitted all the documentation. Now, their recommendation from Horn, where they told TDEM to not reimburse, is going along with that to FEMA. So, yes, we can definitely get together and structure some sort of meetings and get you all the documentation and the memorandum.
We just wanted to prepare council for something that's coming. It's got a feeling that it could be bad, and we want to just make sure you're aware of it. Bad being just pushes other projects further and further down the road. Cooks Creek was necessary. It allowed us to accelerate with the grant. Without the grant, we're back on the regular schedule.
This is gotta be signed though, when you all get over to the house, right?
That was something Perla was working on, yes, for the grant.
That was the documentation that we submitted to TDEM to try and justify some of the missing clauses. Okay, so we will get going on that communication. Okay, so one last item, and it wasn't on your agenda, but I would be remiss not to quickly talk about the budget timeline. Bring that up. Because this is kind of the kickoff here today for our budget season. And I'm using a football analogy. I may use it further on down the road. But I just really quickly wanted to point out that on your desk is the budget book. And it's not a sign, it's not pretty. But on page 51 in that book is the slide right here. And it's just kind of going over the whole lengthy process of getting together our budget. And page 50 through 57, our budget manager, Suzanne Pritchard, put together an excellent detailed narrative of what our process involves in getting this budget out. But what I wanted to point out are our key dates. And I'll affirm these dates every time I come before the council, where we're at now and what we have to look forward to. But right now, February, we're doing our strategic planning session. We're going to affirm our city mission here in a little bit, along with our CBOs. In March, we'll have our director's retreat. We'll have the approval of our annual comprehensive financial report by the auditors. In April, we'll have our mid-year adjustments that we'll bring before the city council. And in May, we start reviewing with our budget committee all of the asks. And then we also have in May our bond election results. We'll start doing study session discussions, gearing up in May and going forward on our debt, on any new fees or changes to fees, our fixed assets, our capital projects, and our salaries and benefits. So again, structured similar to last year, where we're taking this giant thing and narrow it down into bite-sized pieces. And then July, we have our city council budget retreat. And the 25th, we get our certified tax rolls from DCAD. And then we have in our charter the deadline to getting the city manager submitting the budget on the 31st. August, we review with council, we get feedback, and we start planning our public events. In September, we have several ordinances and getting the budget and the tax rate approved. And that is it on that. Any questions on our budget timeline? Okay, kickoff begins.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. While code enforcement's getting ready, something that I saw during Tammy's presentation is cybersecurity, and I wanted to bring that up just simply because I was asked to participate in a meeting in Washington, D.C. of top law enforcement across the nation, Police Executive Research Forum put that together. The crisis, or the money that's going into cybersecurity is important because we have threats like we've never had before. But for metropolitan areas like DFW, the reality is there is a real threat that there will be a traditional terrorist attack in conjunction with a cyber attack. So simultaneously, two things going on. And so it's something that big cities are preparing for, the regions are preparing for. So this money that's being spent in that is extremely unnecessary. Some of the scenarios you see are quite scary, but they're doing some good work preparing for it.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Jennifer Rainey. This is my first time presenting to you, so I'm so excited for this. I'm 15 days into my position as assistant to the city manager and have the wonderful teams of code enforcement and animal services. I'm excited first to present to you on code enforcement and where we head in 2024 and beyond, and seek your guidance as we navigate this, as we push further into our customer service alignment model update. I know many of you are familiar with the knock and greets, those have been discussed before, but our code enforcement team are rock stars. First, I have to brag on them because they have hearts for our community, and they're utilizing their hearts and their passion, their service-oriented mindset, and doing these knock and greets, looking to educate our residents, to inform them of code, not to enforce first, but to educate first. We also have some rock stars that are really bending into this helpful service. I know I've heard stories of Jordan and of James and of Victor going out and helping residents in times of need where they might not be physically capable of moving a tire back to where it needs to be behind storage, behind a fence or something like that. And our code enforcement team has done a really great job of helping individuals, especially if they're maybe elderly or physically incapable of moving some of these larger items. They've also worked with Shane's team in solid waste on bulk pickups in areas that maybe the individual wasn't aware of the technology or wasn't aware that they could put in a service request. There was a mattress that they weren't able to move, and so they worked cross-departmentally to help fix these issues so that it's not a code issue as much as it's just helping a resident, helping a neighbor in need. And they have really poured into their education opportunities. I know I've shared with Nancy and shared with Brittany, they've worked really hard on making sure a lot of our documentation is translated with, as we know, 46% of our residents speak Spanish. We want to make sure that that language is accessible for them. They've also utilized, and then Nancy was sharing about utilizing QR codes, so we're not information bombing them, that we're not giving them so much information that they're overwhelmed with what they're receiving. So they've got the basic information, but they've got those QR codes to help link them to more educational material. And then that bulk waste interaction. I know there are a few of you that's seen those bright orange stickers around town, that you've seen it on the bulk waste, those notifications. We're still doing those knock and greets on those situations too, to make sure, hey, just FYI, this bulk waste can't be out this early, and letting them know when they can put it out, letting them know the process to report that so that they can get that picked up at the correct time. And we also know that that's going to be a fine line. There's going to be some of that empowerment and education, but there's going to be some that are going to try to push that or seek that enabling behavior, and we're going to navigate that on a case-by-case situation as well. And then outreach and engagement. I know, because they've been there, but I know they've been at State of the City, so you've seen their faces, you've seen them interacting, and they are gems in front of people. And I'm really excited to continue to push into those opportunities, whether it's HOAs or local organizations, whether it's meeting up at the branch connection with our residents once that's back up, but continuing to be at those opportunities. I know our team was just sharing their excitement for upcoming events and some of the areas that they want to see code enforcement go into to have that interaction. So they aren't just this enforcement arm, this kind of negative mentality, but there's this interaction and that they're friendly. There's been some benefits from all of this too. Some improved compliance. We've seen some opportunities where we're seeing benefits from some of this shift in their behaviors and shift in their interactions. We know this is going to ebb and flow, so there's going to be some times where we're going to have to be that enforcer. We're going to have to say, hey, this has been 3 or 4 times. It's time to follow the rules now. But there's also been some really good benefits just recently. Some other benefits that have come from streamlining. Nancy and I have talked so closely about efficiency. That is something that I absolutely love, and that's something that I hope I bring to the team as something that I'm passionate about, but something that we can improve our customer service through efficiency, through streamlining some of our processes. It's a great skill of Nancy's, it's a great skill of our teams to find ways to take a process that takes 8 minutes in the field and take it down to 3 minutes. They've got iPads now. Seeing their faces yesterday as they have iPads out in the field that they're able to take out, they're taking the pictures in the field, and then they're able to upload them automatically. We had a process that was taking a lot of time because they would go out into the field after a complaint or after receiving a complaint. They go out into the field, they take pictures with a digital camera, like it's 2004. They take those pictures, they bring it back and plug it into a laptop. That's a lot of time, that's a lot of back and forth, that's a lot of taxpayer money that we're kind of wasting just because of an inefficient process. So we're streamlining those processes to clean that up so that there's more time in the field, but there's that more interaction, that we can spend more time educating. Because if we know anything, education is going to take more time than driving by, taking a stealthy little picture, and then heading on the road. So that education opportunity, when our code officer is speaking for 15 or 20 minutes with a resident and helping them to see a couple of their issues maybe that are in their area, is going to take a little bit more time. And we know that's going to ebb and flow as we build those relationships. And this is an area that I hope to seek kind of your guidance on, and as we continue to flesh it out with our staff, this is an area that I think we can really build upon. The strengths of our team, the strengths of our community, and what I've heard your desires of building that relationship with our community. So we aren't just the enforcers, but they were also building upon some of the areas where our team says, hey, we just don't have something to match this need. We don't have something that's filling this gap. So there's a background here. There's low utilization of our existing program. Some of the complaints that we have within our community continue to be on properties that the residents maybe have physical or financial challenges. They have lower SES, or they're not physically capable of getting out and making that change, whether it's painting the side of their house because there's peeling paint. They just don't have the income, the cash flow. Maybe they're on Social Security or disability, so they just don't have that flexible income to take care of some of these challenges. And this is where we hope to see, where our team has kind of seen a need. We hope to ensure the community's well-being and safety. Obviously, that's a major part of code enforcement. We also want to assist the residents in need, and we want to build on those relationships and that collaboration that enhance the quality of life and the beauty of Farmers Branch residents. And this is how we hope to see that implemented, but we're seeking still your direction and kind of your guidance along the way. If you see needs in your communities, in your specific areas, we'd love to hear those too, just to make sure we're not missing something. I know our code enforcement team is out in their vehicles and they are out in our community quite a bit. A lot of times they're the only interaction that some of our residents have with local government or government in general. So empowering them to have solutions for these issues instead of just a ticket and a summons and things like that. So these are some of the code ordinance updates that we do plan to have coming back. I know our partners in planning are bringing back our home applications. We'll also be revisiting large vehicle parking, our notice requirements, updating our minimum property standards. There's going to be a couple of others as we look through the code, as we're diving through the code. I know sometimes I'm reviewing things, I'm like, I think we could state this more clearly. And if I'm saying that, I want to make sure that we're communicating that with residents too, that we're not overcomplicating, apologies on that we're not overcomplicating that, and that our residents understand this is the code, this is what I need to be doing. And this is where we talk about the future of code enforcement, where I talk about, this is where I get really excited and share my passion for this team, but then also share on their strengths. They have a really, really big heart for our community. I have not met individuals that are so excited to get out there and to be in their vehicles, to be on their routes, to drive their neighborhoods and to interact with our community. I know I was just talking with one of our code enforcement officers earlier this week, and she was so excited to just get out there. I think we should capitalize on that. I really think that that's important because they have eagerness, they have those relationships, and they enjoy that interaction with our community. So we're gonna lead with their culture and lead with their values and their strengths. We're gonna continue to push into and grow and build those relationships as we build those relationships with community partners, whether it's churches or nonprofits, or it's the football team that was just here earlier this week. That's a great group of guys that are physically fit that could really do some maintenance in a neighborhood or in a community. They can paint the side of a wall or move some heavy tires. And if we can build those community partnerships where we've got the volunteer, we've got the manpower, and we're connecting them to residents in need. So maybe we're just needing to fill one or two of those little gaps along that process instead of doing everything or doing nothing along the way. We're going to continue to push into that education and that empowerment, continue to navigate that line, and Victor and I have talked about this earlier this week of there's officer's discretion, just as police have officer's discretion in the time of a ticket situation. You know, officer's discretion probably isn't going to be a 30 mile per hour going 80. Similar in these situations, if you've got 7 or 8 violations that continue to happen over and over, and you keep saying, oh, I didn't know, but we've got notes that say we've been out here 3 or 4 or 5 times and shaken hands and educated, there's an enforcement opportunity there. But we're going to continue to pour into that education and that empowerment too. I know because I see our staff, and I see their faces when they come back from these opportunities, that they're really proud of the work that they get to do, and they're really proud of the opportunities. And they brag upon each other too, even if there are somebody that's a little bit quieter and more timid about themselves, that they brag upon each other's work, and they're really excited to say, hey, Jordan did this, or hey, Gabe did this, or hey, James did this, and I think that's really exciting to show and share with you along the way too. And the last, I think, Mayor, I heard you mention it, I know I've heard a few of you others mention it as well, that voluntary compliance. So this is just this circle that we keep going around, but our hopes are that we take it from code enforcement to, from forcing abatement to that voluntary compliance, where our residents are excited to come home, they're excited to come down their street, that they're proud of where they live, and maybe that it's not because they're income limited or they're physically limited to take care of their property, but that we're fixing those issues so that they're proud to come down their street again. Any questions?
Very good, thank you. Councilman Baird?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Councilman Rutherford?
So I saw in there, in your presentation, that you mentioned making some potential changes to large vehicle parking. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, yeah, I'm pretty new here, so I'm 15 days in, but exploring that that large vehicle parking. I know there's some intricacies there they've explored in the past. I want to make sure I fully understand what our code says and also what our direction is in that. Do we want RV parking in residences? Are we wanting those things? But absolutely, those will be coming back through to council.
Okay, I thought it was like, big box commercial vehicles at first, but that makes sense. Okay. Also, you had a slide about the underutilization of the minor home repair program. How have we marketed that to the residents?
That is a great question. That's before my time, so I want to make sure I get some more information on how that was marketed and how that was utilized. But from my understanding, there were only 2 applications that we've received so far. And I think that we could definitely do a better job if we decide to stick with that program versus something like this. I do know that one of the concerns there was the matching. If we're asking somebody to make a repair, that they have to match what we are donating, that we're giving to them, and that's really difficult, especially in these lower kind of income limited, especially if we're looking at something like disability or social security type of income.
I'll jump in a little bit on this one. The bigger challenge we're running to on the minor home repair program is we need a good community partner that can help us with certain things that we can't do efficiently. Procurement is something that, because of purchasing processes, we're really slow when it comes to emergency repairs. For the city, we can, but for private property, we need to make sure everything 100% did, do some other elements. So we used to have an organization that would help us with certain elements of that, and it's finding another partner organization where we keep exploring different options to see if there's a group out there that can help us with the income vetting, and then also has a procurement process where they bill us and they manage the procurement and the response and that component of it. So we are weak in the social service delivery arena because of the size of our city. We don't have the staff or anybody dedicated to that. So when it comes in, we have to rely on community partners or our own processes. But the income verification is a tough one for us, and the need assessment, but we're constantly looking for ways to address that. This is another way of us to help the community before it gets to that point as well. So it's a balance, but that's why it hasn't been heavily marketed, because we don't have the resources internally necessarily to manage that when our other community partner organization decided that that wasn't a good alignment for their business model to stay in that alignment with us. So with the loss of that partner, that hurt our abilities dramatically in that area. We just can't be nearly as efficient as we'd like to be.
And I think I had not seen any marketing on it. I wasn't sure if there was any, but I haven't seen any, and I like to think that I pay pretty close attention to what's being published. And so I think part of the reason that we've got low utilization is because we've not found somebody to do the heavy lifting to administer the program. Correct. And then we need to figure that out before we can even market it, because then we're stuck in a jam of potentially several people trying to take advantage of this program. So I just wanted to make sure that I shed light on that specific one, because if you're reading it without that context, you're probably thinking it's not a program that's working, but it's just we haven't found an appropriate solution. I think originally Joria, when she was chief of staff, was supposed to be responsible for it. Then the responsibility shifted to the grant coordinator. Then I don't remember who it was. So it moved around quite a bit. And then we talked about doing some kind of agreement with Coppell, and none of those.
We are trying everything we can.
None of those things worked out.
To find a solution. It's a tough one. We have some different leads we've been working on with faith-based organizations as well. So we're trying to find a solution. In an emergency, we know we have community partners. So if a wind event, like the last time we heavily utilized this program, there was a bad storm, they will step in and help us. But for the continuous maintenance and operation of the program, when we did advertise it before, they didn't want to be in that alignment anymore because it didn't make sense because of the amount of money the program is worth versus having to pay a staffer, because it's very labor intensive on the administrative side of the coin. So we're looking to find a good partner that can help us. There have been a lot of conversations. A couple of other organizations have told us no already. It's tough to do. We've reached out to other cities to see how they manage it. It's very tough to manage as well. I believe Carrollton has 3 people working on it. It's a tough alignment to be in. So we're still looking for that partner that wants to not just administer it, but administer it correctly, because it is still taxpayer dollars. And so if in a pinch, we know if there was an emergency, something bad happened and there was a great need, another organization that used to help us would probably come in and help us again with some of the steps. But they don't want to be in that consistent alignment, because then they would have to bring a staffer on, and the contract's value doesn't allow for them to really support a staffer for that, just for us.
And I think the important part of that program is that I think finding a solution on how we're going to manage that program is important to figure out now, because I anticipate that probably at this point we are at 50,000 people or more, but certainly by the next census we will be at more than 50,000, either at or more than 50,000 in population, which qualifies us for CBDG grant funding, and that is how Carrollton is funding the 3 or 4 programs that they have. So knowing that this is coming pretty soon, I think we need to figure this out. I mean, we've got some time, but I think figuring it out, working out the issues, and having that program run smoothly in preparation for more significant funding in the future, I think is important.
Absolutely.
So, if I might, to Councilman Roman's point, very good point, and I know we've had lots of discussion about that. We're at the beginning stage of dealing with builders of hope. And we really need to see proof and performance before we do anything further with them. But maybe an organization like that might be one to talk to. You know, I don't know, but we need to get our own program off the ground with them first, which that kickoff will be March 6th, just for those who don't know. So just in terms of just trying to think of somebody else who we might be able to talk to about helping us manage that.
Thank you. I got
David?
No, nothing else to add. I would echo Omar's points of making sure that we figure out how to operate these programs, communicate them effectively, understand the challenges of the partnerships, and I understand that matching portion was a huge, encumbrance for a lot of people to take advantage of that. So, yeah, it's a challenge going forward, but we need to figure it out.
Absolutely.
I had another couple of thoughts, so I didn't speak too far. Home-based businesses are obviously a problem. Not all of them, but there are a few that are problem businesses, and so that's obviously going to be something that we need to have additional discussion on. Boats, campers, RVs, and trailers is another sore spot for many people in the city. And I've said this before, nobody's saying that you can't have these toys, but many of the homes in our city weren't designed to house them. And, look at other cities that have implemented ordinances to improve the aesthetics of their city, Richardson being one. When I visited with their city manager, he told me they crafted an ordinance and gave a 2-year grace period for everybody to find another place to put it, put their item or get rid of it, whatever. You drive through the city today, you don't see them. And so it has really affected the aesthetics in their city. And we've had people come to city council and speak to this issue. It was on our future agenda list for over 8 months and never dealt with. So the need didn't go away, and we need to figure a way to address that instead of kicking that can further down the road. And the last thing was, I always said when I was on council, I never want to find somebody out living in Farmers Ranch. And that goes back to the whole recycling bin issue, people not storing their bins properly. You can see them everywhere, every street in the city, you can see them. But I'm not interested in fining people, and I don't want to enforce on people unless it's just the absolute last resort. We just want them, or I just want them to comply. And to that point, I also suggested this several years ago of changing the name of code enforcement to code compliance. It's just softer, sounds better. And I would submit that for everybody's thought and consideration as we move through this whole process.
Thank you, I appreciate that feedback. All right.
All right, we're good? All right, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, we're a little early, so it's also people want to stretch their legs. How about we take 10 minutes, and then we come back here at 2:30 for planning, then 3 o'clock for the 410s, and then we'll wrap it up at 3:30.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Sarah Bergman with the Planning Department, and we've got Lily Sutton with Planning here as well. We're going to do our best to fill in for Marcos today. But starting with a comprehensive plan, As we're all aware, the comprehensive plan was adopted in August 2023, and this really was the culmination of about a year and a half process of public engagement, working with a consultant team to draft the plan, and ultimately public hearings and adoption with City Council. And so this is a long-ranging plan. It has a 20-year vision, and we want to start the conversation about implementation now that the plan has been adopted. We start to focus on how do we take the recommendations from the comprehensive plan and put them into action, assign them to specific projects, assign budgets and timeline. And a good place to start when we consider this is to look at the guiding values that the comprehensive plan identified. And so these were really the result of feedback from our residents and the priorities that were identified throughout the public engagement process. I don't want to go through each one in too much detail. You can see them on the screen here, but the plan does focus on investing in parks, connectivity, a variety of housing options, supporting existing businesses, encouraging new ones, and of course, encouraging diversity and quality redevelopment. So, given these as guiding values, the comprehensive plan starts to move into implementation. So we take the guiding values and we start to ask questions and measurables to form a decision-making framework for council and for key stakeholders. And so one example of this would be for the goal of connectivity. We might ask, does an action increase access to public transit as we're considering whether to move forward with the program? And an example of a measurable that we might use in that situation is looking at the number of transit stops and frequency of routes. And so, again, this is one example. The comprehensive plan lists many related to the guiding values. And then we also have our top 5 key strategies for each topic area listed here. And so the ones on the screen are housing, economic development, and redevelopment, and mobility. And you can see again, the comp plan ties these topic areas to the guiding values. Many of these topics will probably look familiar. Some are recent discussion items, some are future projects that will be coming back. And then going a little bit further, the implementation section does start to tie specific projects to stakeholders, city departments, assigns a timeline. Is it short term, long term? What's the funding source? What are the resources needed? Said it before, but this is one example. There are many. And so staff is currently compiling a matrix of all of those projects and recommendations from the comprehensive plan. We'd like to be able to sort it by time frame, short term, long term, by city department, and we'll be providing this to council for review. And we'll be coming back for future discussions with council to really dive into what are the projects that are priorities right now, what are future projects, where should we align our budget to start to implement some of these. And so another thing that I don't want to miss is this is not just a planning department project. The comprehensive plan has implications and recommendations for a variety of departments. And so you'll see economic development, city manager's office, finance, public works all called out in the implementation plan, and we'll be working together to achieve some of the goals that are outlined in this plan. And so again, we'll be coming back for future meetings. I know we've got a joint session with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council later this year, where we'll have an opportunity to really dive deep. But at this point, we wanted to provide an overview, see if there are any questions, feedback that council would like to give at this point. And I'd be happy to answer any of those questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think this is probably one of the most, everything's important, but this really rises to the top because it touches so many things and what our city's going to look like, what goes into our city, whatnot, as time goes on. We just had a very robust discussion regarding something that was put forth regarding landscaping options.
Yes.
And I think there was a pretty clear mandate, if you will, that we don't want to be overly restricted on what people can use to landscape their own property. Well, when we look at the city as a whole, we need to really think about not just landscaping, but the types of uses of property, and does it make sense? And I know for some, what you read in a textbook or learn in a textbook isn't necessarily the real world. There's a difference. So we want to be sensitive to that fact. We also need to determine where we're going to go from a strategy standpoint regarding housing. And while we have programs in place for neighborhood renaissance and redevelopment and demo rebuild, there's been expressed interest in taking a look at those in a little deeper dive. So we'll have those discussions somewhere in all of this. We'll get that scheduled, but because I think we all need to be on board when it relates to that. So we, on our end, we have to do our homework also.
Absolutely.
So, Councilman Merritt, do you have?
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Sarah, thank you. And I know all the work that's gone into the comprehensive plan, documented by over 100 pages of a new product, if you will, the plan itself. Chapter 8 is implementation. You gave us an overview of that. I think I'm really excited that we have this. I'm looking forward to seeing your team's prioritization of what's short, moderate, long, simple, hard, whatever you want to, bucketize those in. But I think it's important that we emphasize what you pointed out. There's a tie-in between all the other departments across the organization and how this fits, whether it's finance, whether it's public works, planning, obviously, but it's important that we look at how we can emphasize where we want to spend our limited resources in making those things happen. Otherwise, we just bite off a small chunk and we never really get to it. So I think understanding what's in the short, moderate, and long-term buckets and figuring out as we projectize these things going forward that we can then fund them accordingly. So, we have the guiding values, and I think for the most part, they line up with they obviously line up with the input we received from the public, which included both residences and businesses going up. And I know you know this, but I'm kind of saying this for those that are watching. But we need to figure out what it is we can start to work on, whether it's streets, whether it is, the missing middle housing that we talked about. What are those options that are there? Understanding what might or might not be palatable, et cetera, and kind of get that sense of how that goes. But I'd like to sort of suggest going forward that there is, yes, you've mentioned we'll have a joint meeting with P&C, City Council, P&C, but these things need to be continuously worked on and not just a single annual, opportunity. And so I'd really like us to start to figure out how that reporting, and I think you've built in here on this particular slide, some detailed reporting, kind of what that dashboard looks like. And so we can communicate that both internally as well as externally to our residents and businesses, as well as those that are interested in doing work in our community and reinvesting, if you will, in our community. So they understand what we have kind of laid out across the community for growth and for redevelopment. So we don't have any more green space to, put a new project of, mass residential, single family homes. That's just not going to happen here anymore. So we have to figure out how we can address those. And these are gonna be interesting, grappling, discussions that we have, and how does that fit? But I think we have a plan that we can all gravitate to, and I hope my peers at the council dais will figure out what it is where we feel most in tune together, and where we have differences and understand those differences. So anyway, thank you for allowing me to be on my soapbox, this is something very passionate for me.
Absolutely.
This is probably the biggest thing that we have, over the next 20 to 25 years. So thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, Councilman Roman? Okay. All right, well, I look forward to having more discussion about this as we go forward.
And for part 2, I'm going to turn it over to Lily Sutton.
Say it again.
Lily's going to present on a different topic now.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Like Sarah said, Lily Sutton with Planning as well. And today I'm going to be talking about expiration dates both within our CZO, our Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance, and SUP expirations as well, specific use permits, and kind of where we're at now and what we're looking to update in the future. So our current standards in our CZO are that SUPs have an expiration date of 6 months. Once they get approved, if they have not gotten a CO, a certificate of occupancy, or gotten a building permit approved, that expires. That SUP will expire. Where that can be different is SUPs that are their own ordinance might have their own expiration dates within those. It's similar to site plans as well. The only difference is that in our current standards, there is not an expiration date for site plans. And we're proposing the update of keeping and maintaining the SUP expiration date in the CZO. We think it fits well currently in our scope. And for introducing an expiration date for detailed site plans or for conceptual site plans, we're still working out the timeline of what we think would fit well for site plans. And, but we do see a need and a desire for expirations on those site plans as well. And if we change something within our CZO standards, that would not affect plan development districts that have a expiration date listed within them, or the SUP ordinances themselves individually that have a separate one. Those would not be included in that. And if there's any feedback or any questions that council or mayor has, I'd welcome to open that now.
The intent for this discussion is council will pass something. It'll sit there on the shelf for 6 years, 10 years, and all of a sudden you have townhomes right next to City Hall and everybody's like, they're allowed by right, it was approved. So you ran into this also with a recent discussion about a hotel versus an apartment complex. If there was a shot clock provision, the approval would have rolled off for the hotel and would have reverted back to its original zoning. And so it allows y'all to have, it doesn't force y'all into conversations. The zoning would behave how it's supposed to behave. So in this case, y'all get stuck sometimes with handling something that a council maybe 2, 3, 4 generations removed past that may not fit today. And so it forces developers into, you asked for it, you have a certain amount of time to do it, or it doesn't exist anymore. And so we feel this is a good tool to have, but we want to make sure council is in alignment with that thinking. But what would happen if we did this is we work with the attorneys to introduce it to anything that's already been passed and start the clock at zeros, because there's stuff sitting out there right now. There's other approvals sitting out there. We want to make sure we go and put the shot clock on those as this goes forward. Now the timer starts at 0 for whatever time frame y'all adopt, but it prevents us from running into these situations where a development that may not fit there is all of a sudden going in. The neighborhood's changed, right? The community's changed from when it was approved. So that's the intent for this, is to create a pathway for council to not have to worry about what was that, because even some of these decisions predate some of my staff. They're 10 years ago, 12 years ago, just nobody remembers that you have to go look through historical archives, and it puts us in an awkward situation with the residents, because they're like, wait, we didn't know that was going there, and then all of a sudden, there's nothing we can do to stop it. And so this gives you all a little bit more power as the council as well to regulate the city while you're on council versus have to rely on something a previous council had already passed. So that's the intent with this discussion, is to say, are you comfortable with us going in this direction?
Any points?
Do we see any issue with those that are already passed? I understand the newness, everything new coming forward, but how do we feel about those that are already approved? I understand the rationale, don't get me wrong, but would the timelines potentially be different for those that are already approved?
Let's say it's a 2-year expiration or a 3-year expiration. I feel very comfortable saying you got something approved, you need to produce it, or you need to come back when you're ready to put something out there.
Correct.
So I'm very comfortable with forcing.
You've answered the question, and I think we continue to discuss that there's still an opportunity for them to revisit and resubmit their plan.
Correct. We'll just also force an inventory of these so we have a better understanding of what's sitting out there.
Of course. So, again, I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves into a legal fracas, if you will.
No worries at all from so far, but we'll make sure we address to where we don't put ourselves in a legal concern.
Understood.
Yeah, Dave, to your point, I would almost suggest that if somebody applies for the SUP, and I use, well, I'll come back to the example. You've got 3 years, a max of 3 years, because hopefully, you know, people are gonna roll off council, but hopefully within, somebody, we hope, would still be there within that 3-year time to, oh yeah, we had that discussion. What happened, you know, we've got several glaring examples. The town or condos that are across the street from Hoya Park, that it was approved to build those about 8 or 9 years before they were ever constructed. What happened? Well, we had homes that got rebuilt. It took advantage of demo rebuild program on Epps Field, and nobody thought anything about it. There's nothing happening there. And then all of a sudden, 8 or 9 years later, oh, there's construction going on, and guess what? You're gonna have a 3-story townhome looking right in your backyard. Not we, but the system effectively destroyed the property value of about 5 homes on Epps Field. And those people will never be able to recoup the kind of money that they thought they would be able to sell their homes for, because stand on their back patio or even in front of their patio door, and you're looking at condos looking right in. And so we have to try to protect property values for everyone, okay? So having a 3-year window, I think, would make sense. Lucy Billingsley, she did the right thing. She came and got permission 4 years, either 3 or 4 years ago, to convert 2 warehouse properties east of Midway to multifamily. Council voted to do it, okay? She hasn't pulled the trigger on it. She's just waiting. She's got tenants in those warehouses, so they're producing, you know, income for her. But at some point, she's going to say, okay, I'm going to tear them down. I've already got approval. Let's go. This getting approval and just waiting to years into the future, you have other stuff going around that, and it could have a negative effect on other development, just like we had on Epps Field. So I think this is really important for trying to protect both parties, people who want to do something in the future and people who are there now.
I don't think my comments indicated that I was against this.
Oh, no, but I'm just putting out an example.
I think we need to understand the ramifications, and as we've talked about before, you know, buyer beware. And so there needs to be some, you know, avenue of, you know, accountability, responsibility for all parties. And so let's make sure that we're emphasizing. I'm in agreement with a shot clock. I've had this conversation with Ben. I think it's important. I just want to be careful on how we're doing it, applying it for those that already are on, you know, have been approved.
There will be a robust communication and notification plan.
So that's the issue. It's not that I'm against this. I want to be clear without question. Having sat on P and Z, I know many times that we approved things that didn't get, constructed. We could talk about Mercer Crossing and all the buildings that we thought were going to be put there. So again, same principle. I understand all the details here, but I just want to make sure that we're not shortchanging. Is 3 years the right length? Is it 5 years? I don't know. I'll be curious to understand. We'll hear more about it when it comes forward to vet that out and make a decision, so.
We'll also look at other jurisdictions to see what's worked and what works well, and just like we usually do, planning's very good at researching, so I know they will do a thorough job of vetting it out and then working through their board as well.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And the anchor.
All right, that's the last one before we move into the critical business outcomes and reviewing those. So HR has a presentation about the 410 items.
Once I find it, hold 1 second, I don't see it saved. It's not in this file, it's not in this folder. There we go. All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yoko Matsumoto, Director of Human Resources. The first presentation I provided you, my career here was on 410, so I'm coming back a few months later to just give you a very quick update on where we are with the program. So the first piece I really wanted to focus on was enhanced customer service. Prior to August 14th, City Hall hours of operations were as noted. So you kind of look Monday through Thursday, we ran 10 hours, and Friday we had a 9-hour day, which pretty much provided 49 hours of service to our constituents in our city. The recommendation that was provided in the initial presentation was more so we were recommending to close Friday, so just being open Monday through Thursday with a Friday close, if you remember. That is not the direction we went, and this is where we ended up moving towards, which if you look at the hours of operations that we provide to our constituents, it did grow, it increased to 52.5 hours. So we opened Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 6. It allows people to come earlier if they have work hours, and so this was one of the big, I think, it was an interesting twist. It wasn't what was presented, but I like all the brainstorms, and this is where we ended and how we're providing services to our customers. The second piece is enhanced employee benefit. So employee work schedule prior to August 14th, we were running 980s. So you worked Monday through Thursday 9 hours, you worked on a Friday 8 hours, you had an hour lunch, and then every other Monday or Friday was off. And so that was a schedule that we had the majority of people working. One of the biggest, I would say, downfalls for that would be sometimes half your workforce is out on Monday, half your workforce is out on Friday. So it was really hard to get meetings when you have 50% of your people running one way and the other one running the other way. This is what it looks like now. So we have two, I call them A and B in my mind. It's not out there, but this is how I see it. So we have a Monday through Thursday, which is a 10-hour day. Friday's off. Lunch is the 30-minute. Or you could run Monday off and Tuesday through Friday with lunch of 30 minutes. And I know you're telling me, Yoko, that's kind of the same thing. Some people are off on Monday and some people are off on Friday. I would say the majority of the workforce is off on that Friday, except those front-facing departments that have to provide those services on that Friday. We did take an employee survey, very brief, nothing like super dynamic. It was about month 4 in the process because I wanted to kind of get a sense of how our employees are liking this. And these are, the respondents were, do you work currently at 410? And I wanted to see what it would look like between the exempt and non-exempt. So this is the data that we got from the survey. The majority of people are working that Monday through Thursday. We have some working that Tuesday through Friday.
And then a few said, no, they're not working the 410 schedules, because we did allow the department heads to, if there were a few employees that really couldn't work this schedule, childcare, what have you, we did allow the department heads to make the decision, as long as it did not interfere with the continuity of business. That is very important. You have to have that continuity of business and schedule your workforce to maintain that. The majority of people that answered our survey were non-exempt. And these were the two questions we asked. How has the 410 work schedule impacted your work-life balance in the last 4 months since implementation? And the second one, how do you feel the 410 work schedule influenced your work productivity? These were the answers that we got back. So, as you can see, the work-life balance, overwhelmingly, 85% of our employees said yes, it has improved it. 12% said there's not really a significant difference. And then 3% said there was a negative impact. The 410s influence your productivity. It's pretty much an 80-20 split. 80% said yes, it was a positive impact. 20% said there's no significant difference, and then 0% said there was a negative. And I believe in my presentation, you had wanted us to make sure that negative, because sometimes working longer hours could have a negative impact. From this survey, we're not seeing that, which was good. I would say on this negative, on the first question about the work-life balance, the few comments that we got, just so you can kind of get on the back end, one comment would be like they're getting home later because they're working till 6, so they weren't able to get to the children. So that was one of the comments that came out. And then the other comment was on the 30-minute lunch. Like, it was like, I would prefer to have the hour lunch. So that's where, on that 3% negative, I would say that's the main reason as to why we have a few employees kind of saying negative. And I told you it was really short. And that's what I have, but I am here for questions.
Yeah, so I want to add one thing before we start having questions with the council. I've started asking about this during orientation for new employees and asking, how was the 410s impactful on your decision to come work for the City of Farmers Branch? And so I don't have a fancy pie chart or anything like that, but generally speaking, 3 out of 4 stated it was significant in their decision to come and apply and be part of this team. So that's an important factor as well. Again, doesn't apply to police and fire. In those instances, they're on different schedules and shifts. Certain departments have a different way they approach it. But for 3 out of 4, sort of like when fire talked about the 4896, that was a driving part of their decision to look at Farmers Branch as a place to work. So just sharing that as more of an informal one I asked during orientation now. I was just curious, that, hey, when it comes to applying to work here, how is this as part of your decision? And so that was an interesting feedback loop that I've started receiving from the new hires that are coming to the city. Again, not everybody can work that. This is mainly meant for my mid to entry level up to mid-level management. My directors are always available. I'm always available. So we do this here, this leadership team. The 410s are not really 410. Y'all know that about us. But for our mid to entry level employees, this is something we try to offer. Talks about AV. So part of the shift we've made as well is we realized that we weren't perfect at it at first, and we're not there yet. Not until we get the lobby done, we're not going to even be closer to it, because now everybody is crammed into the finance department and utility buildings, but at least they're all co-located. So the AV wasn't always there, right? We had some facing front. What we started to do is shifting the departments, especially my front-facing departments, to an AV model to where the director or deputy director is here on Fridays. So there's always a decision maker for the departments in City Hall should something come up. And that also allows the director, if they're off Fridays, to truly be off because their deputy is in City Hall. So that's something we've been pivoting to because we found that that was a weakness in the scheduling as well. So despite the benefit, in case something comes up, sometimes we just need that person at City Hall. So for the city manager's office, Juaria and Jennifer are there on Fridays. I'm there for a little bit, and then I'm there on Mondays, whereas in theory they're off on Mondays. But again, Juaria comes in on Mondays for a little bit as well.
And I would, I have 2 comments to that, which really follows up with what Ben's saying. We didn't really want to, well, we didn't ask people coming in, so I don't have that information. But like Ben said, he asked people as they're coming in. When we were going to job fairs as well, when we talk about that, and we say, hey, we're a 410 schedule, that piques everybody's interest. They're like, oh, they love it, right? So even just going out to job fairs, we just created a recruiting document that had the benefits, and we put 410 right at the top because from our experience going out talking to individuals who might, hey, we're trying to bring you to the table, the 410 is something that kind of piques their interest. The second piece, now it just slipped my mind, what was your second point then that you had mentioned? Was, oh, yes, got that. So yes, I think it is important to note, especially when you're implementing such a change in an organization, it takes 3 to 6 months just to get used to the change. We went month 4 to do the survey. We're not even at month 6 yet. So February 14th will be the 6th month. Then it takes about 12 months to actually get it embedded into your culture. So it's going to take a little while to get things like settled. We did have a lot of changes in the lobby. There's a lot of movement within our organization, new managers, new supervisors, and they're trying to get their feet wet on how it is to be a new supervisor and what does that mean and how to direct my staff and things of that nature. So there's a lot of aspects on the back end that really impact this. So you have to kind of let it breathe some until we get settled and getting the system pretty smoothed out. But other than that, I am ready for questions. Anybody has any?
Yeah.
So I remember having this discussion during a regular meeting at some point, and I hadn't really heard anything for some time, so I remember having a conversation with somebody and kind of asking, hey, where are we in terms of this? I was, I'm pretty open to trying out new things and seeing how it goes. And I was told, well, it was very evident that it wasn't supported and it's not going to happen. I was like, oh, okay, well, I would have been open to trying it, but that's okay. And then I want to say I received maybe a Friday email or something that then said we're starting a 4-week, the 410s, and then it was on the news, and then I was very confused. Just to kind of give you my perspective, sitting in my shoes, that there wasn't very clear communication about that. And then, I was waiting to see what residents might say. So I didn't even have to ask because people started reaching out to me.
Okay.
I guess there's a phone number for the city, general number that they call, and they've said people don't answer. They've sent me screenshots where they've called 8 times in the morning, and they've not received a response from anybody. I personally have gone to the police department and tried to go pick something up that was left at the front desk lobby area, and it was a Friday, and there was nobody there, and nobody could help me, so I called Ben, but most residents don't have Ben's phone number and can get a response. So that brought concern that there was one facility at least that was out of commission. At least half of the building was out of commission to the residents. And so, and then I received another email maybe last week or early this week, kind of stating what the hours were for the fire administration, and it said the same thing: Monday through Thursday available, Friday would close.
Mm-hmm.
So 20% of that building's operation is gone. And so for me, I'm trying to logically think through this and figure out, if we're saying we're enhancing the services, why is it that 20% of the time that, or 20% of the time that the building was open to the public, in terms of if you're looking from Monday through Friday, is now eliminated? And so, and then I've had my own experience. I think this all happened within like a span of like a week or two. I went on a Friday, I had an urgent question about an event that was going on the weekend, and so I ran up to economic development. The suite was locked, I couldn't see anybody in there, the lights were off. This was about 3 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then I ran downstairs to the city manager's office, and the same thing. It was open, but the lights were sort of dimmed, and walked around, couldn't find anybody. So if I'm experiencing these things, and I'd like to think that maybe sometimes we're a little bit blinded to some of the issues that might be going on because, well, people know we're council members and they try to put their best foot forward. So those are just some of the concerns and issues that I wanted to express to you about the program. I mean, I've also seen, I go in for meetings or random times go in there for something to the city manager's office. And as I'm going there, I see employees leaving, and it's about 3 or 4 o'clock. And, it's not one or two employees, it's a group of them that are leaving, and I've asked Ben before, so are the work hours 7:30 to 6, or are they different for people? I mean, if someone's leaving at 3 or 4 o'clock, that means that they're here pretty early. So these are the things that I'm seeing that give me a little bit concern about moving forward with a program like this.
Yeah.
And I haven't gone and tested all the other facilities. I'm just telling you about fire and the police department. I don't know anything about the rec center. I don't know anything about the animal shelter. So I get concerned that people start thinking that people aren't working.
Sure, no, that's a valid point. Thank you for sharing all that information. One thing I would like to say, first of all, apologize that the experience that you were going into ED, you had that customer service experience. There's multiple layers that are kind of going in my head here. And I'll answer some, like, for example, I try not to put what I see and then put assign a story to it. Like, for example, you're coming in, you see a lot of people leaving at 4, automatic you assume they're leaving to go home. It could have been, maybe they were at a meeting, so I don't know the details of the situation, so I don't want to speak to it, because
I did confirm with Ben.
Okay, so you confirmed with Ben. I don't have these confirmations. This is the first time I'm really hearing about all these components, and I try not to say because this experience, it could have been oh my gosh, that was a really unfortunate experience, and we apologize. But if it's a trend, then it's something that, yes, we need to really look at. What is it behind? Is it a new supervisor who's still nervous about, well, Yoko, we have people that leave at 4, they come in here, what am I supposed to do? That's where we come in and we say, you know what, as a new supervisor, it is okay. Like, we have to train, we have to educate them to say, and this was a conversation I actually recently had. And I said, it is, as a supervisor, it's your, right, authority to make that call to say, this is what we're gonna do. And so my personal experience as the HR director, I have had that conversation with people who are really eager to say, I'm not really sure how this works, and we're guiding them through that and say, your continuity of business is this, you have this and this, what does your team look like? Let's walk through that and let's establish something that's gonna work. And that's normal, especially when you're going through such a change in a workforce, like going from regular to 410s, it was not gonna go smoothly, and that's okay. But we have to really hear the concerns. We have to work with our supervisors, our department heads, because again, it takes 3 to 6 months for somebody to actually just get used to the scheduling. And then you go into, let's adjust, let's tweak. If we see a trend, then that's where we come in and we start helping develop new supervisors. We put in the expectations and reset what we're gonna move forward. Because if it is a trend, that's a problem. If it's a one-off, then that's a one-off, and we really need to find out more information as to what is happening, because for me to react, that would be irresponsible of me without getting all the information. So I don't know the answers to your experiences, but it would be something that I would have to go and talk to departments and figure out what is it that's going on, and is it really interrupting the business to our residents?
One of those, Yoko, I'll jump in on this one, is some of our residents have been with the city for a very long time and are very accustomed to calling certain phone numbers for certain answers. As the CSR in the lobby moves forward, we're going to start funneling all the phone traffic for the most part through the CSRs to where they can intercept the calls, answer them, and then transfer them appropriately. We were made aware of several concerns. For example, you shared some of your concerns, which pushed us to move to that AB scheduling to make sure there's a representative from each department there, because that was an unintended consequence. And so that's why departments have been being nudged to, okay, let's start identifying the way we can have Friday coverage. But it's also, as we move forward with it, it's funneling those phone calls to say, if you have a city question, we really need to start with the CSRs, and they're building a repository of questions and answers to where they can get that answer. Or if it's a more detailed question, to make sure we can put it in the workflow to where it gets to the right person to answer, because sometimes they'll think the person they should talk to is Allison when maybe it should be Ryan. So we're trying to make sure we get the calls to the right person. And also at the same time, when they're there, not disrupting the workday, because every single person in this room, they're projects, they're working on stuff all day long. And so it's to prevent them from being pulled away from what they're doing and put into that proper workflow to be answered. And we're using FBTX Connect is going to be the model we use to use that workflow moving forward. Fire and police admin is definitely an interesting one as well. I haven't heard anything from fire admin of it because they're not really a public facing entity. Fire operations is, and they're always available. But the fire admin function, that's why they have their battalion chiefs in that alignment as well. From my understanding, the police department, they also moved to an AV schedule and enhance their service delivery because the detectives are now here later in the day, but they also have Friday coverage. They're always available should somebody show up, but we're also learning from those experiences when residents show up. What was that experience and were there any gaps in service as well? So we're trying to work through those. Those are the 3 facilities that have been modified by the AV schedule, the rec center, aquatic center, library, branch connection, it's closed right now for renovation, have not had any modification work. They have a different service model and alignment. They never were a Monday through Friday facility, but we're still taking that feedback. And you've been a driving force in a lot of that feedback. You've openly shared it with me, and that's where I've been working with the team to say, hey, if you're public facing, I do need a decision maker here on Friday, start thinking about what that looks like. And then, hey, here's the information I need at the CSRs. We are at a disadvantage right now, and I will own that because of while we're under the renovation, our teams were separate. Now they're all in the finance department, which means I have desks set up in their little waiting area, desks in their conference room. So, but that's a growing pain, and I know Danny's working hard on that.
And there was some organizational reorg on that team as well. I mean, and again, I can't, I guess, express this enough. You have to allow us some time to breathe and develop our teams. We tried something. That group was under 2 divisions. We learned it didn't work. So what do? We adjust. We adjust, we move it, now it's under 1 division. What are we doing now? We're working with the manager to actually develop that team and give them time to really move forward. I'm not gonna say it's gonna be perfect because it's not, and if I am, I'm lying to you. So I will be honest, there are gonna be hiccups, but that's how we grow as an organization. We have to try something new. We find out what the issues are. We have discussions with the appropriate people, get feedback. So I'm appreciative that you're giving me this feedback. But now we have to go back and say, okay, let's figure this out. Get the real reasons, understand what's happening, help them work through that, and then we make an adjustment. I promise you there's going to be another slip. Then we go back. So it's that failure piece where you're trying to figure out how to make the system work. And being not even 6 months into the program, this isn't shocking, but we're working through the system and we're trying new things to make it the best thing for our residents, our workforce, and our departments. But I have to allow the department heads the power to be able to run their business that works for their business. Every single department head has a different model in how they run, and so I have to trust, and we have to trust them, they know how to build the business that's going to work for them. And HR is here to help them, guide them through that process.
And I guess just, I think my philosophy has always been, and maybe it's because, as a financial planner, part of what I do is I've got to sort of wrap my head around what's going on in someone's situation and plan for the uncertainty.
Sure.
And so my personal philosophy has always been to be proactive rather than reactive. And what you're describing is a reactive situation where it's like, well, we're going to run with the assumption that there's going to be issues, major, minor, we don't know, it's going to be everything in between, and then we'll just handle each issue one at a time. And it's not very consistent with my philosophy.
Sure.
And so that's where my concern is.
I appreciate that. The way I see it is it's not reactive, it's more of allowing, this is the plan, let's run through the cycle. Where we are in the cycle is this isn't working, so now we go, okay, this is where it's like that cycle of really trying to implement the program. So
Fail forward and course correct.
exactly, it's that whole cycle of, I know there's gonna be, and again, if it were perfect, I would be like, something's wrong. Because we're human, we're trying to figure out the system. We do want to provide services to the residents, absolutely, number 1. And so that's why I said, I apologize you had that experience, and it's a learning experience for us. Is it a one-off experience? It's a really big thing. Is it a trend? That to me is a problem. We need to address the trends. If it's a one-off, it could have been whatever was happening that day, I don't know. But again, I cannot make those assumptions. That would be not professional of me to just make an assumption and then say, you did it wrong because this happened. I need to really understand, and it takes time to understand. situations that everybody's experienced. So this is the first time I've heard of situations that people weren't happy, and I'm HR, I'm back of the house, I pretty much don't get that kind of stuff. So if it's coming up, and that could be something, if we see trends, then we start pulling in departments and say, tell us, how can we help, what's the problem? But I promise you, I did have a conversation with the brand new supervisor, just kind of having the same discussion. I said, okay, let's see, and we talked through it, and we did empower them and say, you are the supervisor, you do have the authority to manage this team. And that is another growing point. We're getting a lot of new supervisors in, and they're still trying to understand what authority they have, and that's where we come in to try to help them understand per policy, per, whatever you can do, you do have that authority to manage your team as long as we maintain the continuity of business, number one.
And part of the reason why I haven't shared these things with you is because my direct point of contact is the city manager.
Absolutely.
Right, so, I think it's incumbent upon him to, if you're the one administering this program and responsible for investigating issues of, just errors. That's what I rely on. So if they've not been communicated to you, then maybe that's a conversation you need to have.
And I would say circumstances, because sometimes they're not errors. If we remember, I always tell people this, it's part of the crucial conversations, don't create the story in your head without knowing all the information. It's really important. And I tell that to all the people that we work with. We can't, in my mind, in my perspective, I see something and I automatically have the story in my head, and you find out that's not the story, and shame on me for doing that because I didn't ask the people what the real story was. And so please be patient with us. I do need the feedback, so please keep feeding it to Ben, and Ben and I will meet on a weekly basis, and he can let me know what are some things. If I start seeing trends, then we go in and we have those discussions.
And I wasn't characterizing it.
Yeah.
I was not characterizing errors with an assumption.
Thank you.
I verified with him, they were errors. So that's why I'm saying that.
Great, thank you.
And Yoko, just to clarify some of this as well, a lot of the departments where these errors and opportunities occurred are my direct report departments, so I've been working with them on those options to make sure we're improving in what the situation was. So this isn't the first time PD's heard this concern, it's not the first time that economic development's heard the concerns, and so they have heard these concerns and been working through them on a department by department basis. And Yoko, one thing I also want to clarify as well is you didn't approach it with the expectation of we're just going to let things go. There was a plan for implementation. There was a lot of lead up to it, but it's that we had a plan with the assumption of there's some variables that we knew would come that we didn't know what they all would be until we encountered them. And that's where the pivoting adjustment comes. And I believe the things we've encountered are within tolerance for a new program. We haven't encountered patterns of persistent concerns from each of these different divisional areas, right? So from fire, I've heard maybe one item. Police, there was that one example. I haven't heard anything from anyone else. I have heard a couple of opportunities on Fridays, and so we've been addressing it differently, such as the nudging to the AB. So we've been making course corrections as we go with the goal of getting it right. But again, it's that fine-tuning element of the structure of the program. So we are moving it forward. We're not just sitting there and saying it is what it is, whatever. We're making those changes to see what we can do to be better about it, and then also educating our teams on what the expectations are as they're learning the new process as well. But again, new and learning, so we appreciate your patience and everybody's patience as we figure it out, and then it comes back to that first conversation with council. The original pitch was to close on Fridays. That was a bad pitch. That was an error from our side, from the staff side, thinking this would be a great idea. Hey, this would be so simple. That wasn't what was best for our residents, and that's what council said, and we can't support being closed on Fridays. And so we went the opposite route, was okay, we're gonna open it even more and be even more open and available for our residents, and that's the goal we still have, is to enhance the service level. But we're not there yet. There's opportunities and we're on it.
Councilman?
So-
I'm sorry.
Finish.
Okay.
So have you had an increase, noticed an increase in usage by the residents during those hours? The hours that would have normally been closed?
We haven't, once we get the new, everything up and running, that's when we're gonna have our CSR start really tracking that, ticking to see kind of days and or time slots.
Okay.
But it's just kind of been in transition.
Okay, and then my next question is, it's really to overtime, and not just overtime, because it's exempt and non-exempt.
Sure.
You guys do a lot of events. Here we are, Tuesday nights. you know, 7 a.m. on Thursday. So.
I'm exempt, it doesn't count.
I know, but it does with life balance, it does.
Sure.
So if you see that they've put in that overtime and they've exceeded these hours, is it permissible that maybe they were being sent home?
The exempt employees or non-exempt employees?
Either, just to compensate for some of the time, the overtime.
So,
Just curious.
Oh, Yoko, I'll jump in on this one. I send employees home that have worked extra hours and hard all the time. Like, my new assistant too over there likes to try and stay late, so we kick her out of City Hall around 6:30. It's one of those that I have a very dedicated team, so if we have a long day or a long night, there's nobody in this room that puts in less than 45 hours a week. Many in here are 50 and 60-hour employees. It's because they believe in this organization and what we do. So the challenge to the supervisors are, and this is very easy concept, the leaders leave last. And so our job is to take people out of City Hall. The only person that I really don't have success with is Tammy, and that's because she says, you want your budget or audit done or not? And I'm like, well, what do you need, you know? So it is what it is.
I mean, I would say definitely each department head manages their team in their certain way, and they have their own, you know, way of managing. But I would say the majority of everybody, they understand, especially all of this exempt. We know we have to do the job till the job is done. We're working hours, that's just part of the, when I signed that dotted line on exempt, that's exactly what I took. And I think everybody's professional enough to know that. We're really good about, yes, especially on some cycles, there are events where people are working, and you kind of work with that. Now on the non-exempt, I mean, department heads have to manage within their budgets, right? So that's something that really stops it. But on the exempt, I would say people are really good about, okay, you're working late a couple of days, just come in a few hours. And that's okay, that's a part of being an exempt employee, even if you weren't working 410s. You know, if you're working a traditional, it's the same thing. And we all understand that professionalism and how we have to manage our schedules.
But we have to maintain coverage. That's the first priority. So coverage has to be maintained.
Absolutely.
And everybody knows that as well. So if we have a failure in coverage, that's an issue.
Does that answer your question?
I think all the topics have been discussed. I mean, you're grappling with implementing something new. There's configuration changes that are coming. There's the newness of it all. So I think the intent is correct. It's just the outliers that occur, and sounds like management is addressing it. So I have no concerns with that regard. I think the coverage aspect is greater, as you showed in the earlier slide. And once the configuration is done, I think we'll have a more succinct, you know, point of entry, if you will, and point of contact. So,
another thing that we did look at on the back end, I didn't put it in the presentation because we kind of monitored on the back end, we did look at absenteeism. And we did see a decrease. People taking sick time, which means they're probably going to their doctors on their Friday off or their Monday off. So that was something that was interesting, and I'm going to really monitor that because I just have this amount of data. I need to see something a little, you know, longer there. But that was interesting to see that decrease there, which was one of the things we had mentioned in the beginning. So.
and then you can't enforce a culture as well that won't allow you to go to a Tuesday doctor's appointment when Tuesdays are the only day your doctor will see you as well. So we have to factor that in order to negate some of the positive culture changes that are.
So it'd be good with council if we brought this back 6 months from February, where we're at now, basically to have that full year wrap up, so we have some more data points to show how the lobby is functioning, if we've been able to address the concerns, to see where we're at that point in time with the alignment. A lot of it's phone calls, I'll just let y'all know. A lot of our customer service, especially utility billing, it's a lot of phone calls, and it's been a predictable pattern of spikes based on shutoffs and other elements.
Anything else? I appreciate your time.
Thank
you
you
so much for your feedback.
Thank
And
you.
I'll see you in a little bit. About a year from now, maybe? 6 months, is that what we're doing?
6 months, yeah. 6
All right,
months, so we have
thank
a
you.
full year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
August, basically.
All right. Time to move into the, if it's okay, Mayor, you want to go ahead and move into these now?
Sure.
All right. Impressive presentations today. It's good to hear everyone and all the good work that's happening here in the city. Once again, as we go through these, what I'll try to do, and you're the leader, sir, so however it works best for you, we will do. But I was hoping to go begin with just the first one, walk through, see if we want to keep them on the list, make a decision if we're going to modify it or not, or we're going to remove it, and then go ahead and go through these first 6 and figure that out and see if there's anything we want to, any addition at the end.
So, Troy, and that's fine. I think as folks have time to digest what they've heard today, that may have some impact, but they're going to need a little time to noodle on it. So we can try to provide answers for today. I know I have mine.
Right.
But I certainly want to be sensitive to the fact that, hey, they may not know
Right.
today.
So then maybe we go through and we take some notes and then just make it a draft for a future conversation. Does that make sense? All right. I think that works better. It's probably even more timely. So, all right. So let's start with the first one. Ensure strategic planning alignment to the current status of city and mission and vision. Are there any initial thoughts if that is to stay or be altered?
Been consistent for the last 3 years, there's no reason to change it.
Well, so that's where I'm gonna say is consistent for the last 3 years. If it's where it needs to be, and in fairness, it's one that you would argue we've got it, because the CBO is something we're working towards to a certain level. With it staying means we're still looking to elevate or change the alignment per se. If it's good and it's where it should be at the right level, my recommendation would be we've achieved that critical business outcome. Let's move to the next one and see what's at the right level to have it done. There's gonna be some emphasis on being more specific on some of these neighborhood infrastructure components and other ones as well. But I just want to put it out there from a framing perspective, is if it's been there for 3 years and it's been consistent, is it at the right level to where we've got that one? Because it doesn't mean we forget about it, but do we continue to focus there or do we move forward?
I think you're talking of a particular framework now.
Yeah.
Which is, this is the framework that we're built upon, which has us looking at the CBOs tied to our functional, our focus areas, tied to the level of service across the 4, tied to projects and or programs underneath that.
Yes.
So to me, as I read these, we want our strategic plan alignment all the way down to all of those 131 projects
Yes.
in the prior 24 CBO list to be executed. So therefore, in my mind, it's a endorsement of this particular framework that leads into each one of those. And so to your point, if we want to enhance it, maybe we look at what are our focus areas, what are our levels of service, what are our projects and programs, what is our reporting on those projects and programs. And I think there's some opportunities that still exist in that space from my perspective. And Ben, you and I have had conversations over several years about dashboards, about project planning, about, and we talked about it here earlier today, green light, yellow light, red light, what are our, who's accountable for these things? I think there's opportunity to enhance that under this CBO going forward in my mind. And I'd be happy to, chart and draw graphics as necessary to illustrate that.
Okay.
I think we should keep it.
I think we should keep it.
Ben, I understand your point, but I'm afraid that if you take this off, and this is really key to, I think, it sets the tone for everything that we do. If it's not there, then I'm not going to say it's going to get forgotten, but I always want it to be top of mind.
Okay.
In my mind, so I'm for leaving that.
So as far as a note in the final report, would it be safe to say keep it, but look at potentially enhancing the details of it?
Yes, what falls underneath that, there's our discussion.
I think it's the operational aspect of that, as well as what We have other charts here on, where we have cross-pollination between the CBOs and our departments. I mean, that's key when we talk about how staff, directors, city council tie into this. That, to me, this is the crux of all of that. If you don't have that, you're like, well, I thought they were handling it, and you get into, that's not the efficiency we're looking for.
Perfect. Yeah, good.
All right, well, let's move on to CBO2, improve access to responsible and diverse housing. Stay, removed, altered.
Tina, you got thought?
The missing middle housing. I mean, I don't know how we address that because we are really land bound. I mean, it's redevelopment, not development.
That would, in my mind, that would fall underneath that category, or within, so.
So retain it, but then focus on the middle housing.
Anybody else?
It's 4 years for responsible housing.
So, I had it off, so I left it there.
Some of these make it for a while.
Yes. This is a
Okay.
marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, we're 2 down. Things are going fast. What about 3? Plan for, build, and maintain high-quality public assets. What's the thinking of the council?
I have a quick question, and I think I need to refresh myself, but when we talk about public assets, that question leads me to ask, is it public infrastructure? And like when we get into water, wastewater, et cetera.
We're always gonna do that with public assets. This was more for the building phase. I would argue that's a maintenance phase on the public
Agreed.
assets.
And I think that's the
for-
key. It's the term,
Yeah.
public infrastructure versus public assets. And that's what I'm honing in on.
That was one of my concerns and questions. But are we putting parks under that as well as a maintenance? And
The intent of this one was the building
just
of
the
new.
new, just the new.
So y'all can always reframe it, but this was because we were entering that phase of building a whole bunch of new things.
Correct.
And currently they're being built, and most of them will be done hopefully by the end of this fiscal year. Some won't be, some will be at the end of the calendar year. And then there's some that hopefully will be started, like Mercer Park. So we're still building, but it was kind of a new phase for Farmers Branch with all this new stuff coming online. But infrastructure, I would say that's a maintenance component to the equation. It's a little bit different. This was really focused on all the new coming on. Once we move into maintenance phase of it and maintaining those assets, that's a different conversation. But we're still building. We've built some. We've got more to go. But are we at the right level? Is the focus still there, or are we moving more into maintenance? I do feel like the departments, especially parks, for example, less creation, moving more, they still have some stuff left to do. Squire Park and Mercer Park are still coming, but they're talking more about getting back to the maintenance side of the equation, the medians, the look, the feel, and maintaining what we have. Public Works is already working on getting there. It's the stuff that's underground for the most part, streets, but it's coming.
I'm struggling. I mean, I just feel like for like Mustang Station, we're just not done over there. Even with the Star Center being online soon and all of that, we still have space that.
That's okay. If it moves down one, it's still a priority. It doesn't matter.
Well, I will say they're not in priority order, by the way. There's no priority order for these.
No.
They're just in order. They're just there.
They're just there.
They're just there. One is not better than the others.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I didn't get my feedback on the last one.
Well, let's go back to that.
But I am happy to keep it, but I wanted to point that out. Then for number 3, I think we should keep that one as well.
I know these aren't in a priority order, but to me, what was number 5 has become more important in my mind. And so I moved it up to that 3rd position. Not that position matters, but it's just, I think it's important that we have good, solid, relevant demo rebuild programs and neighborhood renaissance programs, and that they're meeting the needs of our city. So it can still stay in its position.
Right.
I don't care, but that's how I viewed it.
The council, y'all are set to have a conversation about our residential property program in the near future. So that's part of that, but this is a bigger one saying, are we still in the mode to acquire property? Because it's very specific on, this means purchase properties, and it doesn't mean just residential. Commercial is a whole nother ballgame, which there's really not money sitting around to do that. But this CPO was designed that allowed us to that current inventory of housing we have. This was the one that started the neighborhood. This is why we started land banking, and we are land banking currently in the station area. So our land banking philosophy aligns to this, but we have the land. Or do we acquire more land is what the CPO says we shall do. And so that would direct staff to bring programs and budgetary concerns forward to say, here's money to acquire target properties. Council would set the targets, but that's what this is saying.
So let me back up for a second, make sure I have this straight. We've talked about 3 and we've talked about 5.
We've done 4, it seems like, yes.
Yeah, but 5, it sounds like this is, we'll get to it in a moment, it looks like this will probably move forward, it may move up. But as far as 3, still, do we keep it? Do we, I believe you said, Counselor, that you wanted it kept. Do we keep it? Is it altered? Or what do we do with CBO3?
Well, I think in terms of trying to keep it, if it relates more to what we're building, what we're building is pretty much decided. Hoy's finished. Venue 1842 is going to be finished. And the multi-sport complex is already in the works. So.
That just leaves Squire and Mercer, but that's
well,
fine. Yeah.
But therein, does that fall?
Really more under parks than the building.
So.
Yeah, but the way it's written, build and plan for, build and
might want to
maintain.
say.
So I mean, we've got 3 different functions that are going here, so.
That's been on there for a while because we were starting the.
I understand. And so these sort of harken back to years ago, and we could get into those documents as well, about a philosophy. And this is, to me, this is a philosophy that we are going to plan, build, and then maintain. And so we're touching on this maintain, that we have to build that into place, poor choice of words, we have to incorporate that into our ongoing operation to maintain those things. And so that, to me, is still a crux of what the community, the businesses, and the residents seemingly are asking for, the city to provide. So I think that's, to me, that's a critical business. If we're going to have high-quality assets, those that are already constructed, those that will be constructed, to me, this falls into this. Now, we need to clarify that when we get into
wordsmithing on the actual CPO.
Correct, as we get into the second layer of focus area, tertiary, when we get into what are the areas of, programming and projects. But that, to me, we need to build and maintain things at the highest level going forward.
Can I add a thought to that?
Yeah.
So, for me, I always said we needed to assess our current assets and take care of them first before we start building other projects. Now, that hasn't always been shared by everybody.
But it could fall under this umbrella of maintaining, in my mind. But that's wordsmithing and clarifying the direction and the guidance. And, when we get down to some of these, what is the summary of these particular projects and things like that, the programs. There's a lot of opportunity to clarify all of that going forward. So we're at the highest level, short sentence here, and there's a lot to underneath the water line. Thought?
Mayor, would you want the city staff or the city manager's leadership to just rework this a little bit or give some options for this, or how would you want to move forward on this, or how's the council?
My recommendation to council would be, as you've all mentioned infrastructure, either in this setting or in previous settings, I feel like I would like to work the word infrastructure into it as well, because that's the maintenance side of it. I believe every single person here has talked about infrastructure needs and the importance of infrastructure. That is something the budget will be considering quite a bit, and that's public works infrastructure, let's be honest. But I feel like that's the missing piece from this equation based on the evolution of council priorities as we went from creating, planning for, and building, which we've done. Now we're moving to the maintenance of these assets and then focus on our infrastructure is what I have felt from council. That's how I would recommend updating that CBO in alignment that recognizes the evolution of our journey, but also the new focus becoming to be on that infrastructure piece, which is streets, water, wastewater, and strength drainage.
I'd simply challenge that may be its own CBO.
It could be.
In its own, I think what we're talking about here is structures. Pick your list of structures, pick your list of parks, but I think the CBO for public infrastructure, which would cover water, wastewater, sewer, stormwater, and streets, is its own CBO. We got to figure out what that elephant looks like and how we're going to.
So separating those items from, say, parks, or maybe parks becomes its own.
Parks and buildings, I think, I'm lumping them as we've sort of lumped them together, and Tina, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're reading it the same way, and if differently, please step up and say so. But that's, we're gonna continue to maintain new parks. We have the opportunity to build new parks.
I still feel like that we've done that well, is my only concern with that.
What, not well?
The maintenance component,
Of
the parks.
other parts. Is there a specific example?
I'll use Squire, where they just get dated, right? We just haven't really maintained.
Farmers Markets.
Yeah.
But you just said something I think is key, and I'm trying not to nitpick, but you said we're always gonna build new parks. Well, we may build.
Let me rephrase that. Hoya is a great example. We built a park, and I've had this discussion. We built a park on top of a park that was already there.
That's true.
And what did we do? We built a quality park on top of a park. So we didn't start from a green field, but we improved it.
Yes.
And so, to me, that's still a public asset, fits this particular mold. So we'd have other opportunities. We've seen conceptual ideas for revisioning of Farmers Branch Park, 27 acres or whatever we have out there, but that was a big price tag, and at the point, we didn't want to bite that off.
Right.
So we'll have those opportunities going forward, and to me, that's still building and maintaining a high-quality public asset.
I'll go back to assessing our current assets. So assessing the condition of our parks, which I think addresses your big concern, mine too. And I thought this assessment had been done by the park board. To go through and score the equipment, and if we've got wooden tables that have splintering wood and all that, then, we need to maybe think about how do we replace that with new, more modern equipment? What parts truly need some updating versus what are really good and don't need much attention? So that's the upgrade in assessing or the taking care of what we have.
Sure.
Because that's really important. We don't want to.
Yeah, and I think that's covered, to me, that's covered here in 3 by maintaining those. And so that's why I suggest that we continue to keep it.
Okay.
Okay, gentlemen, you're gonna lose quorum at 4 o'clock sharp, because I have a 4:10 patient.
Okay, well, we have, say, 10 minutes. Well, I think we're at a good place here because you're working on it, you got some good feedback, and you can come back and talk as a group. Is that?
Yeah, we'll have multiple study sessions on this as well. My request to council would be, as you look at these and we consider them, as what are the examples of success for each of these CBOs you're hoping to see? Because that's what staff needs to understand. It's one thing to keep the CBO, and even in reading them, we can each read it and see something completely different. So for my council, I would request examples of success for each of these CBOs. And again, additional CBOs or removing or modifying existing CBOs. it's usually a good sign when council's keeping the majority of them. That means we're on the right track in all fairness, so. And so we add 5 to the list, it's like, uh-oh.
Know that we have a time limit. What does, number 4, any thoughts on that?
I think for me, entertainment is an important piece, just given the things that are being built. So I'd keep it at entertainment.
At entertainment?
I agree.
And we can have a discussion later, but what's the difference between entertainment and art? That might be, you know, a wordsmith. We can talk about it later, not to belabor it. But I think we're back to what Ben was suggesting for all of us, to be specific on what that is. I'd be interested to hear what you have in mind, but I'm not against that by any stretch.
Anyone else on that? We have some clear direction there. We've already talked a little bit about number 5, but looking at number 5 was brought up. Is number 5 and number 2 go hand in hand with housing and then also acquiring property?
I think it's different. I think number 3 refers to specifically public assets. And I think number 5 is specifically referring to, I think it's referring to revitalization efforts. I think that's how I read number 5.
Number 5.
And so I think it needs to, in my mind, I'd be okay with keeping number 5 if it specifies commercial property or some other form other than residential.
And Omar, if I think part of it's, you know, CBO 2 was talking about housing, CBO 5 talking about acquiring properties. I would challenge all of us to think about what was already discussed in the comprehensive plan. And then we have all of those particular programs. And so do we talk about a CBO that says implement the comprehensive plan or prioritize, you know, the direction which includes, and I'm not suggesting for a moment we do away with this. This is something just throwing out there. It talks about the housing. It talks about acquiring property.
It does, but my struggle with comprehensive plan is that it clearly puts single-family housing directly adjacent to multifamily housing, and we know that that doesn't work. And so, although I think it's a great theoretical plan, there are a couple of quirky things on it that I just disagree with. I just don't think they should be directly adjacent to one another.
Well, and let me just add, we're missing 40% of our council right now.
Right.
And so there's a good
Yeah.
bit of information that will enter into this discussion. And so I just, you know, I don't want to set anything in stone without giving them their opportunity to participate.
But we'll get the notes together and provide those for that. All right, so that gets us, I know we have about 10 minutes here. That gets us to number 6.
So what I added to that, I think that's always going to be a goal. We're always looking for a way to better communicate with our residents. And I said better communicate. Community engagement, yes, but it's communication, whatever form that may be. And I just think that's real important because we've talked directly about communication. We've got to be able to touch these folks.
I think it's engagement and communication. We have to.
Yeah, it's both.
Have both.
So I'd probably add that communication in there.
All right. Anyone else on 6? And I'll add too, when you have that conversation, think about all the team members you have. They're your greatest communicators. That's why we talked about early about internal and external communication. Those internal team members can do a lot of communicating. And what I've seen with your presentations is everybody knows a little bit about what everybody else is doing, and you can speak on that behalf. So hearing the fire chief talk about what the police department's doing, the police department talk about fire department, them talking about what HR, that is that is non-existent in many cities, so that's a positive. So just remember that you have a very big strength there as a organization moving
They're trying
forward.
to steal each other's employees, so.
Yeah, well, they are fire
You
employees.
see that? Look how close they're sitting to each other.
One last thing, anything that we need to consider and put on the list for adding to these? Or is everything that we've talked about in these 6 what you've considered? Is there anything else you'd like to add for consideration by the council in the future?
I think I'll simply reiterate the suggestion of the CBO for public infrastructure. And, you know,
I'll second that.
kind of having the water streets aspect.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
We know it's coming, we know it's gonna be a long-term window.
Right.
We need to figure out the best pathway for it.
I believe that brings us to the conclusion. I want to thank the team for all their help in getting me up to speed as I got involved a little bit later in this. So thank you for that. Thank you for your professionalism, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. It's a tremendous city, and it has been an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor.
Troy. Appreciate your leadership in this and helping get us off center on some items. But thank you, staff, again, for all the work that you've done. This is going to be a process, and we will get there, wherever there is, but we're going to get someplace. And I think wherever we get is hopefully going to be a little bit better than where we're at right now. That's our goal. So, y'all have anything you'd like to say?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff for, spending your time. I know you do it all the time, but to be confined in a room with us, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, with that, we will adjourn at 3:53.
7 minutes early.
So giving you some time back.